Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to this week's episode. Yes, they did it again. Of course, I'm referring to the County Executive Committee of the Sevier County Republican Party, along with the usual suspects from in and around the county courthouse complex, and what happened during last week's biennial reorg. We'll break down what went down and the absolute comical farce it developed into, and how events like this across the counties in the state, as well as the rest of the country, how these actions present an insider threat to the liberty of the people in our republic. In addition to my attendance at the meeting, it has been a busy week here in the Linton household. Busy and apparently quite dangerous, as I'll explain in just a second. I also want to let the audience know that I have a couple of very interesting guests coming up over the next few weeks as I wrap up my time at home and prepare to make my way back out west for another client engagement. I'll let you know who they are in the next segment. First, though, who would have thought putting together a tow-behind aerator would turn out to be a bloody event? As a bit of background, Denise and I have been using our very gracious neighbor's tow-behind aerator for a couple of years now. Well, our neighbor's aerators have seen its best days behind it, so my bride and I, we decided to purchase one for ourselves, and our neighbor then could borrow ours. Now, I have assembled a lot of equipment and things in the past, so I did not think this would be a problem. In fact, we purchased a tow-behind fertilizer spreader as well. Putting that together was not a problem, and it only took me the better part of one afternoon to get it done. The next day, I started tackling the aerator. By the end of the first day, though, I was bleeding from 3 different parts of my body. You see, the tines on the fresh out of the box aerator are sharp as razors, apparently. I had the whole thing fall over on my right ankle for the first injury, and not 30 minutes later, both index fingers were stabbed by the tines trying to attach a few bolts. One, this left hand, it was bone deep, and my garage looked like a crime scene by the time I got the bleeding stopped. So, some words of advice, and this comes from my bride. Tape over the ends of the tines and wear some thick leather gloves if you decide to purchase an aerator that is not already assembled and want to do it on your own. For this week, though, the Sevier County GOP shenanigans are going to continue for at least the next 2 years, and some exciting guests that I'll tell you about. So, let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. Yes, folks, the County Executive Committee of the Sevier County Republican Party did it again. Of course, they're only able to accomplish this through their dirty tricks, and that's a combination of acts, which I'll detail here in a bit. Before I get into these good old boy actions, though, I would like to ask the audience to do me a solid and give this episode a thumbs up if you're watching it on Rumble or YouTube. If you listen to the audio-only version, please give it a review on whatever platform that is. Also, please ensure you subscribe to the channel or podcast wherever you listen to it or watch it on. When you do that, it helps with the reach of the show, both in the podcast ecosphere and the social media ecosphere. And because many of you do that already, I've had several guests reach out to me and ask to come on the program. Of course, I've had to turn a couple of these people away because after doing some research, I found out that some of these individuals do not really have belief systems aligned with the message of this program. However, I did schedule a couple of guests over the next few weeks. The first one is a Mr. John Moran. John is the founder and chief executive officer of Grand Opportunity USA. Now, that is a 501c4 nonprofit. He's also founded the new Go United nonprofit. Mr. Moran is a former 2020 Republican nominee for Congress in Massachusetts' 6th District and creator of the revolutionary new OpScore political credit rating system and app. He wrote the 2016 book Cues for Conservatives and the soon to be released pro liberty human rights document, The Universal Bill of Human Rights. In addition to all that, he is a multiple time entrepreneur, a video journalist, a visual artist, a surfing apparel and films company founder, NCAA All American track athlete, a former MIT Space Telescope scientist, a chief marketing officer. And on top of all that, he is the sixth generation great nephew of a great American and the founding father, President Thomas Jefferson. John's trademark motto is this: it's not left versus right or red versus blue. It's really them versus you. Now, that is a theme plainly visible to all of us by now, or it should be, and especially right here in Tennessee. Mr. Moran is focused on holding our government officials 100% accountable, fighting tyranny, and supporting the will of the people. The forgotten 80% of common sense everyday citizens. His mission is to motivate, educate, and mobilize citizens of all backgrounds to advance American values and our God-given human rights, and to advocate for their personal, economic, social, educational, and national interests and needs in line with Go USA's 5 points of opportunity. With a moral imperative to educate and move people to action to save our republic, he is dedicated to uniting the country, holding our elected officials accountable, and reaching a wider audience of voters to preserve our freedoms, liberties, and our prosperity for generations to come. While Mr. Moran has been involved in Republican Party politics, he is an independent-minded and he approaches his political work from a common sense, nonpartisan lens. He has created and developed the OpScore, the first of its kind, non-biased, and universal political credit rating system and app with the support of Go USA's Chief Technical Officer, Jonathan Linhaus, and the team at Go USA, which was promoted to support the victories of over 50 congressional and gubernatorial races in 2022. John is focused on further developing an advanced interactive OpScore mobile app and hiring and directing 100 citizen OpScore special agents to monitor, track, expose, and rate the most powerful politicians in America. We'll be asking John if this app would be helpful for elections all the way down to the local level, so the people could be better informed about those good old boys, so to say, that are occupying the level of government that is closest to the people, such as your county commissions, your school boards, and city officials. We'd also ask him if it's even for Republican Party elections, so we could possibly avoid the good old boy shenanigans here that happen here well into the future. Anyway, Mr. Moran will be our guest for the next two shows, and he'll be followed by Professor Stanley K. Ridgely. Now, Professor Ridgely is a clinical full professor of management at Drexel University's LeBow College of Business. He holds a PhD from Duke University and an international MBA from Temple University, and he has studied at Moscow State University and a Institution de Gestion Sociale in Paris. I guess that's how you say it. Anyway, he is a former military intelligence officer who served in West Berlin and near the Czech-German border, where he received the George S. Patton Award for Leadership from the 7th Army NCO Academy. In addition to his teaching, Dr. Ridgely lectures widely in the United States and internationally. He is Drexel's faculty sponsor for Turning Point USA, an organization which we dearly like here on this program. And he serves on Drexel's faculty senate, as well as being a member of Drexel University's Institutional Review Board. He's a frequent contributor to national media, including the Epoch Times, Academic Questions, and American Greatness, and is the highly praised faculty instructor for the course Strategic Thinking in the DVD series The Great Courses. One of Professor Ridgely's books, titled Brutal Minds, The Dark World of Left-Wing Brainwashing in Our Universities, quite popular. And I pulled the following quote from the preface to that book. Quote, "Much of university life is controlled by subsidized paranoiacs, amateur psychotherapists, neo-Marxist totalitarians, student affairs professionals imbued with authoritarian mentality, and racialist thought reformers who run workshops that destroy family ties and traditional beliefs to clear the way for new relationships grounded in racialist ideology. These are the brutal minds who threaten and abuse students in the name of academic fraud called anti-racist pedagogy." In Brutal Minds, award-winning professor Stanley K. Ridgely exposes the dangers of radicalization, cancel culture, academic censorship, and the growing influence of socialists boldly transforming colleges across the country into re-education camps of dull conformity. An educational charade masks activities and ideology as dangerous as those that inspired Communist China's tragic Cultural Revolution. This book strips away the facade of the modern American university to reveal the malignant, bureaucratic viscera inside the institution. It is a dark world, an anti-intellectualist sanctuary where brutal minds can find purpose, protection, camaraderie, subsidy, and power. Dr. Ridgely's book calls us to action to halt this anti-intellectual takeover of higher education and to restore the greatness of one of Western civilization's most brilliant creations, the American University. A tale of how one of history's great institutions, the American University, is undergoing an infiltration by an enemy of mediocrities whose goal is to destroy it as an institution of knowledge creation and replace it with an authoritarian organ of ideology and propaganda, unquote. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to this interview, and so should any parent with a child getting ready to make the transition to college life later this year. His most recent book, though, is titled DEI Exposed: How the Biggest Con of the Century Almost Toppled Higher Education. It's a #1 new release on Amazon Books, and it puts the spotlight on the big con of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The book dives into how DEI gurus siphon funds for education into social engineering programs and how they suckered and swindled some of the smartest people in the U.S., costing universities dearly in terms of funds and reputation, and ruined the livelihoods of countless faculty members. DEI, as we've all seen, has fueled anti-Semitism on college campuses all across the nation and, ironically, robbed many students of fair treatment and freedom of speech, two things which DEI advocates supposedly champion. The book explains how these hustlers pulled that off as it documents the dubious credentials of DEI supporters and superstars, the use of cult conversion tactics on students, the cultivation of campus informants to instill fear and suspicion, the lavishly paid DEI bureaucrats, and the lawsuits that reveal DEI's virulent racism at a high cost to universities in bad publicity and legal damages. The book lays out this corruption so a course can be chartered for a restoration of higher education for years to come. Professor Ridgely and his interview will possibly take us through 3 episodes of the show. By the time those 2 interviews wrap up, the end of the regular session of the Tennessee General Assembly should be on us, and I will be reaching out to a couple of the representatives and senators there and invite them on the show to give us their thoughts about how the term went And what else do they, along with us, need to work on? Additionally, we'll be reaching out to a good friend and fellow freedom fighter here in Tennessee to get his thoughts on how far our supermajority of Republicans in the state of Tennessee have driven the state's government away from the Second Amendment and the decision handed down by the Supreme Court in the Bruen case from just a couple of years ago. Wow, that's taking me up to the end of this first segment, folks. When I come back, I'll get into the poop and comedy show of what happened at the Sevier County Courthouse last week. Stick with me. I'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. Now, just where do I begin in discussing last week's reorganization meeting? How about, and I know this is repeating facts and evidence that everybody on the County Executive Committee as well as the State Executive Committee are and have been aware of for a long time now. And that is the fact that, as usual, the Sevier County GOP did not operate in accordance with the Tennessee State GOP bylaws, not only in the announcement of our biennial organization, but in the way it's announced and the way it's conducted. I've shown that evidence on my website in addition to discussing it on this program. I have also forwarded that evidence to every member of the Tennessee Republican Party State Executive Committee. They did the same thing in 2023 and got away with it because Scott Golden, the chairman of the Tennessee Republican Party, and his cronies know that Sevier County is one of the top 3 cash cows that carries the entire state of Tennessee and the revenue we generate. So they don't want to rock the boat, in other words. So they think if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Except that it is broken. But it is broken in such a way that it benefits the select few and not the rank and file Republicans here in the county. It should, but doesn't amaze me at the level of incompetence and the enabling of incompetence that the state GOP organization will put up with as long as their bottom line isn't adversely affected. Also, as long as it doesn't impact their seat at the table. Other facts and evidence are the other blatant violations of the bylaws that have been discussed on this program before. Those violations adversely impacted 2 of the 3 candidates during the primary elections last August, and only benefited the 3rd candidate because he was already part of the good old boy network long before he ran for state office. Now, at this meeting, I was the only person that stood in opposition to the re-election of the currently serving and extremely ethically challenged chairman of the Sevier County GOP. No surprise there, because very few people of the rank and file Republicans were even aware of the reorganization meeting, and those that were aware could not take time off from work due to the short notice given of when during the middle of the day the meeting would be held. That's the violation of the bylaws there. Anyway, as I pointed out before, the Sevier County GOP is one of the very few, if not the only, because we still don't have the dates and times for every county yet, but it's one of the only parties that holds their reorganization during the work week and during the middle of the work day. In the 60 seconds I was allotted to address the assembly, I brought this up, and the current chairman responded in his remarks, which I'll get to in a bit. Anyway, so I show up at the courthouse last Tuesday around 30 minutes prior to the meeting. I got signed in and then started noticing the other people that started checking in. I have to preface this observation with the fact that the currently and ethically challenged, mind you, chairman of the Sevier County GOP is none other than the county sheriff, which led me to this observation. I have never seen as many deputy sheriff badges and constable badges in one location in my entire life. That isn't hyperbole, folks. At least half of the voting members present that checked in were in some way connected to those law enforcement organizations here in the county. Nothing like coming out and quote unquote supporting your boss and trying to maintain control of one of the political party apparatuses here in the county, right? So, as one of the 2 candidates for chairman, I was afforded the opportunity to speak to the voting members present for 60 seconds. I brought up the ethical failures of the current leadership of the County Executive Committee. I also addressed the average age of those present in the room, which is about 8 days shy of dying, and how that is representative of the current leadership's failure to grow the party. That was a point that I really try to hammer home. These old folks in the room were not reaching out to the younger generation, and it will end up biting them in their rear end in the long run. I pointed out their abysmal social media presence and how the opposition is running circles around them in exposure and outreach in the community, which has resulted in the commies and their alphabet mafia foot soldiers holding drag queen shows in town and building and having floats in local parades, as well as a booth at the county fair. The best our party could muster was to open a Donald Trump store and post that information on Facebook. Only back in October of last year, though. I reminded the audience of the most dangerous phrase in the English language being, well, that's the way we've always done it. After I had my say, the chairman got up to rebut it. As it related to outreach, he informed the audience that there were voter registration drives at 3 different high schools. Voter registration in a state without closed primaries could result in you registering Democrats to vote. I don't see that as a big win, especially since that age group tends to be more left-leaning than they do right-leaning because they have not had life and government smash them in the face yet. Also, though, 3 voter registration events in 2 years? That's definitely a lack of outreach. Next, the chairman brought up the financial standing of the county party as the best it has ever been, which should be very concerning since they have only held 2 putt-putt fundraisers in 2 years. What that says to me and anybody capable of critical thinking is that since the sheriff is the chairman, people are donating to the county party to either buy influence or access. 2 putt-putt fundraisers are not going to move any organization to its best financial standing in the history of it, ever. But once again, the chairman failed to acknowledge the pitiful state of social media outreach and presence, and he completely avoided the topic of the cheating during the primary elections and the failure to follow the bylaws leading up to and during the organization. That's when the voting commenced. And it was an overwhelming victory for the good old boys. The rest of the executive committee officers ran unopposed, and it looked like the whole thing would be over with in record time, or at least in enough time that nobody would have to go past their lunch hour. But they messed up with the renomination of every at-large member to be reelected again. Now, they did this in 2023, and nobody called them out on it. They forgot that I was there. And I called for a point of order and asked them how somebody who was just elected as an officer, also be reelected as an at-large member of the executive committee. I almost felt bad for the poor guy that read from the slip of paper that was handed to him by the good old boys. He had no clue that he was messing up, but then again, the good old boys thought they could slip that by this go-around as well. You should have seen the look of confusion on their faces when I pointed that out. It caused them to scramble to find a replacement. Then I asked the question, is everybody that's on their quote-unquote at-large slate, were those members even present to accept their nomination? Once again, confusion reigned as they did not know the answer to the question on if they had to be there or not. The bylaws don't mention that, but I just wanted to see if they could answer the question, and initially they couldn't. You see, that is because they are so used to making up their own rules as they go to keep their county or their country club intact and to keep their gatekeeping as active as possible. So there I was, with a few friends in the audience, laughing at the mad scramble the executive committee was engaged in to work their way out of a bad situation that was of their own causing. Their solution was to vote in all of the seats that weren't opposed, with the exception of the one seat that was now vacated by the individual elevated as an officer. Here's where I engaged in some more fun, as they engaged in some more self-inflicted confusion. As they put forward 2 names instead of just one for seat number 4, which would have been the easiest way out of the situation, I threw in another name of one of the people that came to the meeting and sat with me. So they now had 3 people to vote for 1 position. That took a bit of time, and the clock was now approaching noon. These people's lunch hour was nearly over, and they were anxious to get back to work. But Another problem then ensued. With three people running, nobody had a clear majority of the vote, meaning they had to take the two highest vote earners. The lowest vote earner was my friend, which was no surprise, and then revote again. So this is the third vote, right? Well, their lunch hour was over now, and they had to vote a third time for the one at large seat. A lot of the good old boys had left before noon out of frustration, and it was glorious to witness. In fact, I left the room about a quarter after 12, and they were still going at it. It is funny because it was a situation of their own causing. During the second round of voting for the at large seat, and after it was clear my friend was out of the running, I even cast a blank vote just to make them count it and record it. So, not only was the biennial reorganization an exercise in futility because of the machinations of the good old boys, it was also an exercise in hilarity because I and my friends threw a wrench into their plans. I did not expect a different outcome than what had occurred, so it was really a bonus to watch them fumble about in confusion, as well as a bonus of some infighting when they had to pit two of their own good old boys against each other in two separate votes. I drove home laughing. Well, that went a bit long, so I'm going to pause right here before I come back with my closing thoughts in addition to this week's wisdom from God's Word. So stick around because I'll be right back. Well, folks, that will do it for this week. Be sure and tune in the next few weeks as we talk to some important guests on the program. If there is any breaking and important news, I will be sure to put something together and get that released to you if it isn't time critical, or I'll put it in a blog post. Now, there has been some rending of garments and gnashing of teeth the past week or so over some made up story involving Secretary of Defense Hegseth and other members of President Trump's national security team. Always, always, folks, give the story time to play out before you let the commies get you into a lather. As the facts come out, you will find that these evil people will stoop to new lows in trying to bring down President Trump and anybody in his cabinet. There were no classified battle or attack plans in that chat. Speaking of which, all of you should be asking the most important question as it relates to that quote unquote fake news. Exactly how did the editor of a left leaning news organization get added to a chat of President Trump's people? Was it a deliberate ruse? Like somebody putting a number with the wrong name in the chat? Those are kind of things that make you go, right? As Dan Bongino used to say during his program, let the facts come out before you rush to judgment on any story. If the commies are losing their minds over a chat group, but didn't lose their minds over the Afghanistan withdrawal, General Milley's backdoor communications with the Chinese Communist Party, or their Secretary of Defense secretly undergoing surgery without the knowledge of anybody, including POTUS, while the Deputy Secretary of Defense was out of the country on vacation, you are being played. Relax. Let the facts come out. And then laugh at every commie that demands any member of President Trump's cabinet resign because they hurt their feelings. Okay, so this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Just how long do we have to wait to see the unfaithful destroyed by duplicitousness? Well, we may never see it in this lifetime, but that does not mean we stop trying to call it out and expose the people for it. That is how we maintain our integrity. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.